right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the final episode in season 6 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and today I'm joined, as always, for these last episodes by the undisputed king of Tom Petty playlists, John Paulsen.
Oh, that is going in my Twitter bio. I think the undisputed queen. I'm sure there's some people there that would dispute it, but I like to think that I'm up there, at least top 10 in the Tom Petty playlist building arena.
Well, listen, I haven't seen anyone yet who's beating you, so I'm leaving it there. I'm leaving it as it is, in my opinion. So,
yeah, this is a fun album, Southern Accent. So you want to just dive right into it?
Yeah, so I'll sort of give the all the furniture about this. So it was recorded at, all over the place. Sound City in Van Nuys, Village Recorder and Sunset Sound in LA, Church in London. So that would have been a lot of the stuff that Dave Stewart put on there at Tom's house, which, was ill-fated. Produced by, again, we're going to get into that. So Tom Petty, Mike Campbell, Dave Stewart, Jimmy Iovine, Robbie Robertson. Engineered again by Shelley Ackers and Don Smith. And then also I found David Bianco. So I'm assuming that was either the engineer over in London or the guy that Robbie Robertson maybe brought in to do the edits that he did. I'm not too sure about that because I couldn't find the specific information. It was released on 26th of March in 1985. It was recorded, of course, between 83 and 85 for reasons I'm sure we'll get into. Peaked at number 7 on the US chart, and there were 3 singles. So Don't Come Around Here No More, which peaked at number 13. Make It Better, Forget About Me was number 54, and Rebels peaked at 74. And usually I talk about the additional musicians on the album too, but there are 25, so I'm not listing all of them.
So a hodgepodge of everything in this one, right?
It's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, I think, even the ardent Tom Petty fans who love this album still recognize at least that it's all over the place. It's the least cohesive album he made by so many miles, right?
It is. And it was, again, I love doing this podcast with you because I'm forced in a way to go back and listen to the album front to back 15, 20 times over the course of my research, just to sort of understand it as an album. And then, these weren't the album. And as I mentioned before, I really got into them, Full Moon Fever and beyond, but these weren't the albums that I was listening to front to back. I did own this CD for the singles, and I do remember, the singles, and, but just listening to some of these album tracks and listening to it as a whole, it was, looking at it from a critic's eye, was definitely all over the place.
Sonically, thematically, just everything about it. And again, when you get so many different producers coming in, that's always going to happen. And I was wondering afterwards, and again, we've got a lot of conversation to get there maybe, but I was thinking about if Robbie Robertson had produced this whole album, what that might have sounded, because the band have a lot of the same sort of rock and roll sensibilities that Dave Stewart definitely doesn't have, right? But they don't have that same kind of big bombast that Jimmy Iovine has. I think Robbie Robertson, of all the people who worked on this, might have actually suited as a producer for the whole album. I kind of got thinking about that after I'd finished. I was like, yeah, that would work because, Best of Everything sounds a very specific way, and we'll get into it. I'm not a huge fan of all the horns on that, but the sound, everything else, the way it's mixed and the way it sounds is more in keeping with what you expect from a Heartbreakers record, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the band is considered Southern rock, even though there's a lot of Canadian stuff going on there, but I love the band. Their sound's amazing. And I think Robbie Robertson would have done a good job as a sole producer and kept it more cohesive, because I think he did do a good job. I differ with you a little bit on Best of Everything. We can get into that a little bit later, but I think he did a nice job with that track.
Definitely.
So let's just start with Rebels. As you mentioned, peak 74 on the US chart, 5 on the rock chart. Tom couldn't finish it. I'm laughing because this story is just crazy. He went back and listened to the demo. It sounded fantastic. Of course, he famously punched the wall, destroyed his hand. He said it was a huge wake-up call, and he sobered up for the remainder of the production of the album. I do love that opening line. It just grabs you from the start. Honey, don't walk out. I'm too drunk to follow.
It's crazy.
This is one, I've grown a larger appreciation for it over the years. I think listening to it back, growing up in Wisconsin, it felt like it was, a love letter to the Confederacy, but it really wasn't. You look at the lyrics and you start to dig into it and you hear what Tom said about it. It really is about a character who was raised that way and sort of embraces that and his perspective. And it wasn't so much that it was Tom singing, his own thoughts on it. It was just, he knows people like this. And just kind of, living in the South and kind of resenting the Northerners. And having lived in Memphis for 3 years, I can firmly attest to the fact that some Southerners are still upset about the Civil War and how it ended up. So I really think sonically it's a good, catchy tune, especially for something that you're looking at as maybe the opening track for a concept album about the South. I mean, to make a pretty good single out of that is pretty impressive as well.
And to be the opening song for any album, really, even if it's not, because like you said, sonically, it comes out the gate, you straight in, you're all in right away, right? It's just it's the perfect opening song. And like you said, Paul Zollo in his book asked him, some people have seen Rebels as a song about history. Some critics say it was a muddled history. And Tom says, I don't see why it isn't really. It's a story song about a guy being arrested for drunk and disorderly and his frustration at basically what a screw up he is. And he's trying to blame that on his heritage. So again, it is written from that perspective. So I think this is actually a pretty good point to jump into some of this stuff that I think, unfortunately, it is too easy to misinterpret that, right? And especially once you sort of get into Pack Up the Plantation and the Southern Accents Tour, where you're now bringing in that Confederate imagery and you're diluting that message that, yeah, I'm not sort of a proponent for the lost cause or for slavery or any of those things or any of those components of the South. But when you mix that message and you start bringing out the Confederate flag and stitching that into your jacket and having it on the screen, you lose some of the impact of being able to say, well, I didn't mean it that way. You know what I mean? Like you can see where that confusion came from for sure.
Yeah. And there's this underlying theme in all songwriting is that there's a subset of the audience that only listens to the chorus.
Yeah.
And really isn't diving into what the, each of the verses mean or what, all the language that's going on there, what that all means. Cause that's where he's explaining the song is in those verses. So
yeah,
you just listen to the chorus and you think it's like, oh yeah, we're we should have won the war or something. But he didn't help things by bringing the Confederate flag onto stage and kind of using it, branding his tour, and he regretted that after the fact. I mean, reading through Tom's interviews throughout the years and stuff, he was very much against slavery, against racism. I mean, these are basic things to be against, but he was not embracing any of that sort of mentality from the South, and he definitely regretted and understood and tried to empathize with what the Confederate flag meant for a large part of his audience, and then also for African American Black people, just the sort of hate and pain that brings up. So I think he came full circle on that and sort of apologized for that aspect of it. But as a song, it's a great opener. I do like the horns in it as well, and I think it does a great job of kind of launch pad for this album.
And it was the horns that actually, I think, from reading back up in Warren Zane's book, that was actually kind of the triggering point that really triggered that frustration with how he couldn't get it to where he wanted it, because obviously got those 12-string guitars in there. So it's a big full sound before you add the horns in. So trying to get the horns in, if you're not a producer and if that's not really your prime skill set, trying to get those frequency separations and getting that sonic space in there to fit those horns in so everything's not jumbled, that's tricky. And so that's why Jimmy Iovine comes back in. But it's at that point where he can't get this mix. And he said he goes back and listens to the demo that he'd written and realizes the demo sounds better than everything he's done to this point. That's where he goes and pulverizes his hand into the wall, right? So
yeah, he said he felt lousy, quote, lousy and lost about the production of this album. He and Mike tried to produce it themselves, and there's just too many drugs around, and there's also too many people around, hangers-on he was talking about. So it's just a different environment that Heartbreakers were used to working in, and I don't think that was conducive to him to be at his creative peak.
Absolutely. But like I said too, though, I still, and I do have problems with talking to Michael Washburn on last week's episode. He brought up that thing that, I mean, you'll be more attuned to this than I would being an American, obviously, but we sort of societally and culturally, being a Brit and we colonized, we invented colonialism, we started all that bullshit. Sorry, everyone. But it's the idea that, in 1985, it was a different time. We always say that it was a different time. So do we judge a piece of art by the standards of that time or by the standards of now? And Michael brought a really good point up, and it sort of really made me think that that's a bit of a cop-out sometimes, right? Because like he said, people were thinking about these things in 1985. They were thinking about it in 1965. They were thinking about it in 1875. It's just that it was this cultural thing where it was allowed to stagnate and just keep perpetuating, right? And so having that conversation and being more attuned to that and sort of thinking about it a bit more intelligently. I think it is incumbent on all of us to do that. But I think that's something that I found, and people should go listen if you didn't listen to last week's episode, because it was Michael's very thoughtful. He approached the subject very, very well, much more academically than I can do. I'm much more informed. But aside from that, like you said, the song itself, if you just take that out, all that sort of context out of that and just listen to the song, and even some of the lyrics that are a bit more neo-Confederate, that line, I can still feel the eyes of those blue-bellied devils. That's just so poetic. It's so cool. That's such a great line. You can imagine when he wrote that line, just going, I can finish work for today.
Yeah, that's a good one, and that's one that definitely shows that it's from that point of view. Like you're definitely getting into the head of the mind of this guy.
And there is a counterpoint to it too that I don't know if you sort of looked into the artwork. And obviously, so it's a painting by Winslow Homer from 1865 called "A Veteran in a New Field." So he was a Union soldier in the field, not a Confederate soldier. And there's some questions about whether they sort of realized that when they were putting it together, because it was Tommy Steele again from Steelworks who did the artwork and packaging with Tom. So it's that thing of, well, that looks great, and they've got this, they know it's a soldier, but maybe they don't pay attention to that. So again, it's that there's another friction, another sort of conflict there with this album that makes it even more of, I'm just going to say a mess, it's not quite the right word, but makes it disjointed. So I found that really interesting.
Well, let's just go in order here. We're going to skip over track 2, but Don't Come Around Here No More. This is the track that drove that album sales ranking to 7th on the chart or whatever. I mean, this was a huge hit for him, 4th biggest hit for Tom, peaked at 13 and 2nd on the rock charts, 13 on the Hot 100 or whatever. The thing I wrote here in terms, I mean, everything that's been said, everything's been said about this track, right?
Yeah.
So this is obviously a terrific track. It's the way it picks up at the end is amazing. You did a great job of outlining the live version of this, because this is the memory for me. This was my first Tom Petty show, I believe, if I remember correctly. I saw him at the Marcus Amphitheater during the Into the Great Wide Open tour, and he was still playing a lot of stuff from Full Moon Fever as well during that tour. So it's just if you go back and look at the set list from that tour, it's just incredible. But they had this giant tree on stage, and it was this long Don't Come Around Here No More, this long theatrical performance. And I really encourage listeners to go, if they haven't seen it, go to YouTube and find that. Maybe you can put the link in the show notes to see that performance, because that thing blew my mind. Just the way the strobe was hitting at the end, and the way that the pace of the song picked up, him running around the stage, getting chased by former presidents, U.S. presidents. It was really wild. And just from the opening to the end of that was just really a crazy moment in that show. And it's one of my most vivid memories of live performance by Tom. But I think this is a little bit funny, because he kind of took this from Stevie Nicks. If you go back and look at the history of the song, it was sort of meant for her, and he happened to start working with Dave Stewart prior to her getting there and laid down the track, and she's just like, I can't sing it any better than this. So I wonder if it's a little bit, because she had such a huge hit with Stop Dragging My Heart Around. I wonder if this is a little bit of payback, just karma payback for that. Like, not, I mean, he obviously gave her that song, but he took this one and did a great job with it and had a huge hit with it.
What? And I love that, because wasn't it Jimmy Iovine sort of said, locked her in a room or something, right? And said, don't come out until you've got some lyrics for this. And they sort of came back out, and she threw him and they said, wow, these aren't great. So she goes away, comes back the next day, and Tom's got this whole lyric. Well, what am I supposed to beat that? Like, I can't beat that.
I think Tom's intention was that she was going to sing it.
Yeah.
But she's just like, this is better than anything that I can do. I'm not going to try to compete with this. You run with it, Tom.
It's kind of cool that too, right? Where you get artists at that level, because she could have sung it and it would have been a massive hit for her too. But just that sort of little bit of humility and that bit of recognition that, I could definitely sing this, but not that well. I can't do it like that. And it's just like, I always, when I sort of talk about this song with anyone, the one word that I always come back to is just weird. It's just such an odd, unusual, unique song. Nothing sounds like this song in the rock and roll canon, in pop music. I can't think of another one. It's one of those songs like Eleanor Rigby or We Will Rock You that is just its own thing. It just sits outside everything else that anyone's ever done.
Yeah, and I would love to know exactly how the music for it came together. I mean, Dave Stewart obviously had a huge influence on this song and wrote most of it, or had most of it, in place. But it definitely has his stamp on it. But Tom's very much there too, especially the vocals and
Yeah.
everything. And obviously the video is a huge mega hit as well. So yeah, this is one of those weird ones where just you throw some weird ingredients together and you get just amazing greatness.
One from reading Dave Stewart's, or like passages from Dave Stewart's autobiography, I think what happened was he basically got that drum loop. He'd got the drum loop in and all those weird sitar kind of sounds, and he had that progression, and that was sort of the the verse section, and that's the structure of that song's even weird. There's like the verse, chorus, or which bit? Well, don't come around here no more is the chorus, obviously, but then you got these other bits in there. Anyways, so he's got that written essentially, and he brings that to Tom, and that's where they start messing around with it. And Tom brings in the double time. That's all Tom said. Yeah, we should go to double time here. It should be more guitar driven now. And then they get the guy with the cello. They bring this guy, this symphony. So Tom says, or Dave says, well, we should put a cello in here. And I guess Dave just runs out of the room, buggers off to Los Angeles to go find someone from a symphony, brings this guy back in who isn't a fly by the seat of your pants musician. And they say, well, just play. And he says, I don't have any music. You don't need music, just play. And this guy was like blown away. Like he couldn't believe that you could make music this way, right? So everything about this song, like I said, everything about this song, don't come around here no more. Stevie Nicks saying that to, Joel Walsh, like everything about this song is enigmatic and sort of mythological almost.
Yeah, sometimes you throw these ingredients together and you just get horrible, dreadful stuff.
Yeah.
In this situation, you got genius. We got genius out of it, and we get to enjoy it the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. And it's funny because one of the things that Michael said last week was, or I think he maybe wrote in his book, that if you try and sit down and play this on an acoustic guitar or just play it on a piano, you can't do it, because it's more a sort of a, where did he put it? It's more of a sort of an accomplishment or an achievement of production than it is of composition. It's like you said, it's finding how to fit all these weird disparate parts into one whole that God only knows how, but it works, and it works really,
I'd like to hear acoustic versions of songs, like that are not acoustic or whatever, and just to see how people interpret them. But I have a feeling this one wouldn't go over very well.
It's just, I mean, yeah, Rebels is great. Dogs you can do, and both those songs he did acoustic later in his career. This one, yeah, you need the full production. So I'm really envious that you got to see that one live, because yeah, that video is just something else. And Mike's intro, it's like, it's easy to forget when he's just sitting in the background, he's just laying the rhythm down, everything else. He'll throw this all in, but this guy could lead any band. Well, he does now, right? He could lead any band in the world because he's just that good.
So underrated, Mike Campbell.
Oh God, I mean,
incredible,
grossly, yeah.
Southern accents.
Sure.
This is I think we talked about it briefly through Twitter DMs and stuff. The only problem I have is I think you called it the side stick at the start. It sounds kind of, echoey, maybe as reverb, or, I don't know what the proper term for that is, but I'm not crazy with the rhythm opening on this, but obviously it's a great song. I mean, its lyrics are amazing. I mean, I love that lyric that drunk tank in Atlanta is just a motel room to me. I think that was also inspired by Johnny Cash, something that Johnny Cash said to Petty, if I'm remembering correctly. Just some great, vivid imagery in it, and I prefer the live versions to it for the reason of that opening sound, but understanding that the studio version has its place. I would love to hear if there was more of a stripped down, less messed with production of it from the studio, or a demo. I would love to hear it, but not sure anything like that exists. Certainly hasn't been released to my knowledge. So, but I love this song. Definitely kind of a slower. It's very melancholy and kind of stops the album a little bit and makes you think. And but yeah, just I think the lyrics really shine the most in this track.
Well, and I've always loved, we talking about the live versions. My favorite version of this song is the version live from Gainesville, that was included on the Rundown Dream, because it's just, he's in his hometown, and you can see it's real. The emotions, that's not an artist playing a part on stage to a crowd. That's a genuine connection with Tom playing this song in his hometown in front of his people. And it's just beautiful. And when, again, Mike's guitar playing on that version is just, it's so subtle and understated, but it's so essential to carry the mood of that section of the song, And it's
I think
when he sings, oh, and he wheels away and his hands in the air. It's almost like this religious experience that he's having. It's so amazing.
and I think he really captures he talks about, people say that this Southern accent is dumb or it sounds dumb. There is that sort of attitude, in the South. People are still a little bit self-conscious. Some people are a little self-conscious with the way they talk,
Yeah.
and they think they sound dumb. I don't, I think I've met a lot of intelligent. I've met a lot of everything in the South. And an accent doesn't make you smart or dumb or anything, but it is in the States. It's definitely used as an example of, if you're trying to show somebody that's, Hicks or backwater or something like that. So I think that he's sort of touching on that aspect of it. Like the people in the South are, wide range of personalities and everything. And you can't judge somebody by his accent. You can't judge a book by its cover. I think that's a good message for the song.
And it's funny because that's the thing that I connected to really strongly the first time I heard this song, because I'm from the north of England and it's the other way around in England. If you're northern, you've got that very sort of, and I don't have it anymore, nowhere near have my accent anymore, but that northern accent's viewed in very similar terms with, like the elite down in London and everything. So like growing up, you only heard one type of voice reading the news on TV, and it was very clipped, very British. Here's the news, that kind of thing. Where it wasn't until probably the late 80s, early 90s where I started hearing people with my accent on TV presenting things. So you do get that sort of real. It gets you back up, and of course you're going to be defensive about that if people think you're stupid just because of the way you talk. So I really latched onto that. I think I've told the story before, but geez, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, I had my Tom Petty playlist on while I was out. No, it wouldn't even be, that'd be 3 years ago, maybe. I was out running and I had just finished a 10K and I was just coming back round to sort of the last 500 meters, warm down, cool down kind of thing. And that song comes on. And you know that thing of where it sort of takes your breath away, the emotion just tightens your chest up. And you just, for that little split second, you can't quite breathe. And you think, I don't know if I'm going to cry or laugh, but something's going to happen. And I had that moment. And this song, if it catches me off guard, if I'm not ready for it, it still has the ability to do that just because it's so beautiful. It's so, it's so passionate and so beautiful. I just love it.
And it's actually like this and Rebels, I think, where when he was trying to do a concept album about the South, these are the two quintessential songs on the album, in my opinion, for that goal, due to the subject matter.
Yeah. Well, that's because I said, I think, I don't know if I talked about this with one of the episodes, but the four really are Rebels, Southern Accents, Dogs on the Run, Spike. Those are the four Southern songs, right? And then we've got some of the other stuff that didn't make the album, which we'll get into. But everything else is just sort of, it's this mishmash of weird choices and unusual situations and a lot of cocaine, by the sounds of it. A lot of cocaine.
So should we touch on Make It Better, Forget About Me, since it was a fairly big single for Tom and the band? Peaked at, as you mentioned, peaked at 54th on the US chart, 12th on the US rock chart. Per the US Billboard chart, it was Tom's 18th biggest hit, which is when you think about it in terms of just the highest rankings. So there's 17 songs that finished higher on the US Billboard chart than this one, which really puts it way up in the pantheon in terms of chart success for Tom. So it's something that at least to consider. And it's funny because he hated it after the fact. I believe he called it trash.
Yeah.
He said that in Conversations with Tom Petty, Paul Zollo's great book. Wish it hadn't made the album, said it was a bad decision. You don't hear him usually. There's one here and there. We'll talk about one on Full Moon Fever in the future, that songs he's just like, oh, I don't know how that made the album. Like, it's funny to have him, who's in charge, really ultimately in charge, could have killed any song he wanted to kill. It is jaunty. It's a catchy tune. Definitely, it's a Dave Stewart production, right? So one of the three that he was in charge of or produced. So it's interesting that as big of a hit as it was from the chart standpoint, that it drew the ire of Tom Petty after the fact. So that's really all I have to say about it. It's an okay song. It is catchy. It's a decent album track, but it's funny to hear Tom talk so badly about it.
So what I'd written about, I think the last thing I'd written about this song in the episode was, said like, where Don't Come Around Here No More and You're Gonna Get It took the Heartbreakers into new territory in which they planted their flag and owned the space. I just never feel like they're living in the bones of this song. It's almost like they're covering someone else's track, right? Because it just never feels like a Heartbreakers song. It's not a bad song. It's a pretty good
Right.
pop song, actually. I just don't really necessarily want Tom Paine and the Heartbreakers singing it because it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, I had written down jaunty tune, comma catchy, and I think
Yeah.
that does. I mean, I don't think Tom liked it, and so therefore I knock it down a star or two.
Well, and it's the opener for side two, right? You've had Southern accents on side one. You get up from the couch, flip the record over, and then this is the next song. It's just weird. And then we get another left-hand turn for the next song. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. We're going back to saying the same thing over and over. The album's just, it's not cohesive.
Not cohesive.
It's not cohesive.
But so I wanted to talk about Dogs on the Run. So this is the track. Every time I do one of these podcast episodes with you, and I do all this re-listening to the album over and over again. There's a track that usually emerges as like this one that it's just a sleeper for me. So like I hadn't really listened to Dogs on the Run with any sort of consistency over the years, and listening to the album so many times, this one really jumped out to me as a good Heartbreakers track. And I, looking at the history of the song, it did make sense because I do gravitate to the Mike Campbell riffs and the tracks that he tends to bring in, and then Tom improves on them, and the two of them together when they write it's magic to me and like my ear. So this is one that I added to quite a few of my my playlists as a track that I want to hear more regularly than I have over the last 20 years. So I'm curious to hear what you think of it.
It's not at the level of Rebels. I don't think it's
Right.
just Sonics and all those kinds of things, and it's not got the same gravitas as Southern accents. It's not got the same weirdnesses. But in terms of an album track, this is how you write them, man. This is like, you could probably have released that as a single as much as Rebels, to be honest, because it's got a lot of sonic similarities to it. Yeah, it's how it sort of pins together because it comes after Spike, right? It's the third song on track two. So you get Spike's this character sketch, and then you come out and straight away you get that beautiful arpeggiated guitar run. And then it's a song that, what I like about it is dynamically it moves lots. Even though it's got a consistent thing throughout and it doesn't move, there's not a whole bunch of different sections in it, like Don't Come Around Here No More, whatever. But it doesn't leave in one place. Like the verses are all kind of separate. There's not really a consistent story. So it's got that. It almost reminds me like Jack Kerouac on the road. When I read that book, it's got that same wanderlust, that wistful sort of always looking around and never quite being settled or happy in one place. And so again, you've got, what is it, 3 minutes? What would it be? 4 minutes? 3:40. You get this painting of almost the whole South to me in that song, or almost like a Steinbeck thing where you've got these people traveling and they're itinerants and they can't settle down anywhere. So it's got all these sort of big thematic dreams, and I think it hits them all. And again, like I said, I think this was the only song on the album that Mike Campbell Paul wrote. And I was reading back again in prep for the episode, and during that time, there was a lot of stuff going on, but Mike says to Warren, says, I was writing a lot of songs at that time. I was writing in bulk. So he'd sort of send Tom just 20 songs or something on a cassette, fully produced, drums, bass, guitars, he put synths in there, whatever, just no lyrics, right? And so what I like is that this one jumped out, because you would hate for this one, because there was another one during that same batch of songs that didn't make it, that ended up being a huge hit for someone else. So I'm really glad that this one kind of got through the net, and Tom realized that, I got to write something around this, because it's a fabulous song.
Yeah, it sounds, their process writing over these years it's very interesting, because Mike Campbell, you could easily see him getting frustrated that more of his music's not making the album. If he's really writing, handing him 20 songs at once. But Tom confirmed that, like, he writes in bulk. He's prolific in terms of his guitar riffs and writing of guitar music. And Tom would anything that jumped out at Tom, he would grab it and start working on it, and they usually worked out very well. And I think this is a good example of one that he liked it too. He said it's one of the better tracks, not well known. It's because it's on side 2 of an album that's kind of got some hits, and it wasn't released as a single, but it probably could have been.
It's an example though of when you've got two artists who really do trust each other. That trust relationship, for Tom to say, I only like this one out of the 20, for Mike to know that Tom's not disparaging those other 19 songs, but just can't find, there's no way in for him. Because that's what Tom said, right? He needed to it needed to connect with, I need to get an idea almost immediately about, yeah, I can do something with that. Or maybe I've had a theme or an idea that I can sort of transpose and overlay onto that. But that trust relationship between those two guys, that's what made the Heartbreakers, one of the things that made the Heartbreakers as good as they were, because Mike knew that Tom's ear was pretty freaking good most of the time,
Well, and I think it's lack of ego for
Yeah.
Mike, certainly. A lot of songwriters and guitarists with his talent could be a lot more of a pain in the butt to their lead singer frontman than he was. So I think he's just got that sort of humble attitude. If you're not following him on Instagram, listeners out there, follow him on Instagram, because he's doing some videos where he talks about songs that he's written, then goes into how that came about and performs a little bit, and it's just great. He's a real nice guy, and just a great guitarist. Probably my favorite rock guitarist of all time. But then also the lack of ego on Tom's part when Boys of Summer comes across his desk, so to speak, and he passes on it because it's not what they were trying to do at the time, and they didn't see a way in. And then Mike goes on, has obviously a monster hit with Don Henley doing the vocals on it, and and Mike's just like, that's good. It paid for my house. Yeah. And Tom was happy for him. It wasn't like he was upset that it didn't work out, or that he didn't push hard enough for that track to be on Southern Accents or a Heartbreakers track in general. So, I mean, just the fact that they're both like, okay, it didn't work out for the Heartbreakers, but I'm really happy that, Mike went on and had a major hit with it, with Henley.
Super cool. I like the story that Mike tells about when he sort of gave the track and Henley sits there and just listens to it, doesn't say a word, doesn't look at him, doesn't look up, and then says, yeah, I think I can do something with this. Mike leaves and thinks, well, I guess probably he's not going to use that. And then 2 hours, 3 hours later or something, Henley calls him and says, dude, I think I've just written the best song I've ever written. Like, how cool is that,
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's good to see Mike get his due outside of the Heartbreakers too, and have something that Tom passed on turn into such a major hit for him.
But I mean, all those guys, Ben Mont, not quite as much on the writing side, but the sheer volume, when you really dig into it, and I'm still finding other collaborations that you think, what? He worked on that song, or he co-wrote this, or he played on this. And Mike Campbell's played on and written with a lot of different people over the years, aside from his work with Tom.
And there's one lyric in Dogs on the Run I wanted to point out too, because you did mention Dogs on the Run as one of the 4 songs that's really about the South, right? So it jumped out to me. She said, honey, ain't it funny how a crowd gathers round, anyone living life without a net, how they'll beg you for answers, but it won't ever be enough. There's no way you could ever tell them. It's just Dogs on the Run. I thought that was a very poetic, I think that was the last verse of that track. So, and I use it when we get to the producer of the day, I use it to set up something else. And I think it is something about maybe somebody restless in the South that wants to see the world, or at least wants to see the country.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so funny because I'd written that down too. Like, I'd pick off, when we do our episodes for these, I pick off little bits, or whether it's a riff or whether it's a whatever it might be, and that's the line too that I'd written. And it's funny because when I interviewed Jake Thistle a long time ago now, he'd quoted that line back because I'd said something about he was doing a show where he was turning up. I said, like, well, how much sound check do you get? He said, none really. And I said, so you're 14 years old going into a bar and you're just standing up and playing an hour in front of a bunch of adults who are drinking without a sound check and with sort of, and he says, and that's what he said. He said, it's funny how a crowd gathers around anyone living life without a net. And it is that sort of nice mantra that you can kind of hang a lot of deep philosophical thoughts on, I think. So very cool.
So the last track off the main album as it stands that I'd like to bring up is probably it might be my favorite song on the album. Don't Come Around Here No More is obviously holds a special place in my heart, but The Best of Everything has really, especially over the last 10 years or so, as the nostalgia's hit, this is a wonderful, wonderful song. And I want to confirm with you, maybe you didn't do this, but did you rate Spike higher than Best of Everything?
I think
so. Think about that. I'll vamp for a second.
Go ahead.
Because in conversations, Petty said it may be one of the best songs I ever wrote. I agree with that. I think it's just gorgeous. I've been listening to it a lot lately, especially lately after doing this research and stuff. It's just an amazing song, and he used the title as the title for one of his compilation collections, and I love the quote: "Being good looking had its limits." The something that she said, I think, to him, the character said to him,
Yeah.
and just the pictures that he's painting throughout the song are just incredible. And it's just so wistful, and you know, it's over before you know it. It all goes by so fast, and the bad nights take forever, and the good nights don't ever seem to last. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, and so I'd written again. I mean, you talked about Dogs on the Run being that earworm that once you start, and so same thing. Like once I'd gone through the album and then I did the best of everything, I kind of because I sit down and I listen to it in the context of the album. What I usually do is listen to the whole side before I do a song, and then I listen to the song 2-3 times just to kind of get the rhythms of it and pick out. Okay, I'm definitely going to want to talk about this. I'm definitely going to want to talk about that horn line. Blah 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 blah. But I don't really sit and just listen to it. Just kind of let it float in. But damn it, man, since I did that episode, it's been the song I've been listening to, same thing over and over and over again. And I've definitely come to the conclusion that I scored it too low. So I think rather than dumping Spike down, I think I've got to time over again, and maybe I'll revisit this one. It's definitely an 8 at least.
Yeah,
Because
I would
it
say
is
at
just a
least.
glorious song.
Yeah, I would say a 9 or a 10, especially with how Tom looked at it too. When he said it may be one of the best songs I ever wrote, you just got to kind of consider that. If it's Tom saying that, then you got to give it at least a 9, in my opinion. It's a great way to end the album. In my producer of the day alternate track list, I do not end the album with this track, but I think it is, for what they had to work with and what they decided to include on the album, this is a perfect way to end it.
Well, again, another funny, not funny story, but a weird route for this song to end up on an album where it was written for Hard Promises, didn't fit Hard Promises, and you can sort of kind of see that. Given to Robbie Robertson, who needed a song for the King of Comedy. And so he goes away and says, "Can I put some horns in it?" He goes, "Well, doesn't let Tom in." They do all that kind of stuff. And that's the only part of that song I don't like is that lead. I think it's a flugelhorn or a French horn or an English horn. It just sounds a bit 80s to me. You know what I mean? And if you take that out, which I'm going to see if I can get some software that'll actually take that out just to see what it sounds like without that line in. The rest of the horns are fantastic because it's the band, man. Like the band use horns better than almost anyone, right? There's no question about that. So the rest of it sounds great. And I also think, because I think we both picked the alternate version with the extra verse, I know why you take an extra verse out, especially when you're dealing with a song that's already got an album that's already got a couple long songs on there. I totally get that. But I like that extra verse. And I think the pacing then of the song changes that little bit where it gets just even better, right? So yeah. So no, I'm going to hold my hands up and I'm going to say I agree with you. I rated this too low, and I think it's probably one that, because I think there's this one, anything that's rock and roll, and there's one other that I think I might go and do a remix episode on sometime just to see how I feel about them now.
So I have a little bit of trivia for you.
Excellent.
Do you mind if I? Okay, so I like to look at, I use Spotify. I like to look at the number of streams to sort of see what other fans are listening to in terms of what are the most popular songs on a particular album or for a particular artist. So I wanted you to name the 5 most streamed tracks from Southern Accents. See if you can do it. It doesn't need to be in order.
Okay.
But if you can name the 5, which one of the 5 of the 9, right? There's only 9 tracks. So on Spotify, what do you think they are?
I'd be pretty confident in saying that "Don't Come Around Here No More" is number 1.
Yeah,
I'd be absolutely blown away if that wasn't the case.
With a bullet, yes.
With
34.1 million.
I'd say probably because it was released as a single, "Make It Better" is probably in there.
It's not.
It's not in there. Well, that's good news. Okay, so then I'll say, just going from gut, then I'll say Rebels, Southern Accents.
Yes.
Spike, because fans love it.
Nope.
Spike's not in there, really.
Oh.
Please don't tell me Mary's New Car is in there.
It's not.
Oh, thank God for that. Okay. It Ain't Nothing to Me's in there. Top 5.
Oh.
Okay.
So
that only leaves 2 then, right? That's Dogs on the Run and Best of Everything.
That's right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
here are the numbers for you. 34.1
Okay.
million for Don't Come Around Here No More. I thought that might trip you up, but I wasn't sure. 34.1. I wouldn't have guessed it. 34.1 million for Don't Come Around Here No More. Obvious, but that would be in there. Rebels, I think, was obvious as well. And I think after that, you could probably guess that Southern Accents would be on there, and it is, but it's fourth. It's 3.0 million. 3 million on the dot. Well, not really on the dot, 3,046,000. And then, but actually in the third spot was Best of Everything, 3.6 million.
Wow.
And then the number 5 track was Dogs on the Run, 1.07 million. So Spike, you mentioned 871,000 streams, and Make It Better, Forget About Me was 750,000. 750,000. So those were the 5 that had at least 1 million streams. I just thought that was interesting. So a little piece of trivia for anybody that's out there wondering which songs are resonating with people. So it is interesting that we both, excuse me, kind of like Dogs on the Run.
Yeah.
And it has crept up in the top 5 here in terms of what people are listening to off this album.
Definitely. Okay. When I follow up, I want to ask you just a very direct question and see what you think. Is Mary's New Car the worst song that Tom ever put on an album?
I love the way that you phrase that. I wouldn't go so far. I have to really think about the worst track on each album and then try to rank them, and the bottom. I don't. It doesn't do anything for me. I left it off of my producer for a day track list as well, alternate track list. Just doesn't grab me at all. I know there is a demographic of women named Mary who do love this track, and they have bought a new car, and this is the theme song. But for me, it doesn't do a whole lot.
Well, I love the sentiment behind it. I said this in the episode, that writing a song for Mary Clouser, who's the den mother, as Tom called her, for the Heartbreakers. That's super cool, but it never goes anywhere. It's just like this weird. It's the only time, honestly, and I hope people take this for what it is, but it's the only time I can think of in the catalog where it's a lazy effort. Like there's just nothing happens in that song. It's the same thing for for almost 4 minutes with this repeated thing. I think I've figured out there's only 10 actual lines in that song. So even like, if you look at It Ain't Nothing to Me, Make It Better, I don't love those songs. I can't remember which song it is off the second album that I just think is unfinished. This one's just like, dude, really? And even so, I'll just read you quickly. Benmont. Oh no, he wasn't talking about Mary's New Car, but he's talking about some of the songs that were left off. And I'll just read this a little bit. So it's from the Warren Zevons biography, and he's talking to Benmont. He says, the bigger picture was that we were all on a lot of coke. On Long After Dark, I discovered how much cocaine there was in the world, and then I came home and I went straight on tour with Stevie Nicks, and boy, did I discover how much cocaine there was in the world. He says, the Southern Accents was a great idea for a record. Tom started writing that record, from what I understand, by just writing words associated with the South. Rebels, trailer, apartment. Then somehow, out of those 3 words that become songs, 2 are left off the album. How the fuck do you leave trailer off Southern Accents and Make It Better and something else I can't remember are on the album? So he says it'd be like leaving No Second Thoughts off You're Gonna Get It, or You Tell Me Off Down the Torpedoes. So that's Benmont sort of saying the same thing, right? We're getting these weird choices. And what I don't know is who actually did decide sort of the final track listing. Because I know Jimmy Iovine was the guy who said, we're not doing a double album. When he came back in, and Tom said, can you come back and help us? On the condition that, first of all, you get out of that house, we go record in a studio and get away from all that bullshit. And then the second thing is, we need this structure around what we're doing. So I don't know if Jimmy was the one who sort of said, well, these are the songs that we need to put on to make this pop record. If you're going to put Don't Come Around Here No More on there and Make It Better, then maybe you want to put Mary's New Car. I don't know who had that final say on that, on the track listing. So
yeah, if you read between the lines and look at the time, the things that are going on at the time, and you look at the last album, Long After Dark, and what Tom was seemingly trying to do with the tracks that were left off, and Jimmy called them too country.
Yeah.
If you remember that conversation. It seemed like he was interested in visiting this roots rock for quite a bit of time here. And whenever he tried to do that, Jimmy was pulling him back into more of a mainstream, arena rock type sound. And I think some of the stuff like Trailer, the Apartment song, Walking from the Fire. So those are the 3 that were written you can correct me if I'm wrong, written during this time
Yeah.
and left off, and they kind of made their way out into the world via playback box set or the American Treasure compilation. But if you look at those three songs as a whole, it's definitely fits within the, Southern concept album about the South that Tom was going for, but I don't think Jimmy was on board with it. And a lot of that stuff just got removed. And I think at a certain point when you're working on an album this long, just the track, the track list just kind of maybe gets thrown together, and this is what we're left with. And Tom looked back on this album and was happy with what it became. He said it was a very much a struggle to get it written and stuff, but he was happy with the album at the end of the day. I just think it could have been better, and we can get into that soon.
Absolutely. But there was, and I didn't know this until I read Michael Washburn's book. I'd missed this in when I was reading the Zane's biography. There was a fourth song that Tom had called Sheets, and it never made it out of his notebook. Benmont says he doesn't know anything, so I'll just kind of read you. So he says, yeah, there were songs that not even Tench knew much about that didn't get past Petty's notebook. One of them was called Sheets, a stark look at the racism that so often structured life in the American South. It was a really scary song, Petty says, but one that would have had to have been included if the original idea for the album had been carried through to its conclusion. And I found that really interesting because I was saying to Michael that, that where Rebels kind of gets misinterpreted and gets spun around for people to use as their own sort of battle cry, had he written this song Sheet and included it, and I'm assuming it would have been, we can only assume that it would have been very critical about, racism and lynching and all those kinds of things. Maybe that would have offset some of that. Maybe it would have made that it would have clarified the concept where he's not sort of advocating for this, but he's sort of commenting on it critically. So it would have been super interesting. And God, wouldn't you love to see the lyrics for that? Because
I'd love to hear it.
Probably
whatever.
Well, I don't think it was ever recorded. That's the thing. I don't think it was recorded. I don't think the words got off the page. But God, it would be fun to see, or interesting to see what he'd actually written down there.
Yeah, I wonder if, because he usually sits there and writes with a piano or guitar. I wonder if there was, him a demo. I'm sure it was not going to get out, but if there was some recording of it, however bad it was, I would love to hear it.
Me too. Yeah, really would. Well, let's get into the outtakes then, because they're good ones, man. Like, again, as Benmont says, how are these things not making this album? Like, it's crazy. Trailer. How does Trailer not make this album? It's so good.
Let's start with Trailer. That's with Stevie, or is Apartment Song with Stevie?
Apartment Song is with Stevie.
Apartment Song with Stevie. Okay, I had the note written wrong there, but it's great to hear this version of it. I think I knew it prior to hearing them revive it for Mudcrutch, and I think the fact that he did revive it for Mudcrutch indicates that Tom did like the song quite a bit and probably was a little upset that it was left off. It made the playback box set. It also made the American Treasure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It made playback. I don't know if it made American Treasure. Didn't make American Treasure. Apartment Song did.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I got myself mixed up here. So the demo is really good. I love the line, boy, she used to look so good at times. Like every time I hear that, I laugh. I just get a chuckle out of it. It's like, it's a compliment, but it's also like a backhanded compliment that, maybe she wasn't that good looking, but at times she looks so good. And maybe it was something going on with the character's, headspace. But I think it's, it absolutely should have been on this album. Certainly added it to my version of it. And then Apartment Song, it's great to hear him and Stevie singing together. They sing together for the entire track, and definitely both these tracks have major vibes of the South and should have been included.
And I think what I like about those two, especially because out of the three, those are the two that were used later.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of see how there's definitely a creative growth before they get re-recorded, right? And so then there's definitely sort of a sonic difference. So where in the Apartment Song, you get Mike's solo, on the Full Moon Fever version, you get those big toms, and it's kind of keeping that really rhythmic beat going, so we don't get that solo in there. So it's just that creative change. And I really always enjoy watching how songs evolve over time. And quite often that does happen live, where artists will take things in different directions and they'll change the mood or the tempo, whatever it might be. But getting that sort of that growth through the recordings and having those old ones to go back to is always super interesting. It's the same thing with Trailer, because on the original you get that really staccato, muted guitar playing that Mike's doing that doesn't end up on the Mudcrutch album, Mudcrutch version, which is a lot more country. and it's got a bit more of a country swing to it than a rock and roll song, where the original has got a country flavor, but it's more Southern rock. So I really love those differences to see how the creative process changes over time. It's lots of fun to see that.
Yeah, Mudcrutch also just seemed like at the end of his career, Tom was really exploring his Southern rock.
Yeah.
What could his career been if he had just stayed with Mudcrutch and really explored the roots rock, Southern rock roots from his his growing up and his youth. And then I really like the fact that the trailer came back as a really good track. So it's they finished it up and it's quite good.
Well, it's those ones. It's same as Best of Everything, right? Where obviously was really happy with the song, and it's funny here because when we listen to those songs, we're not the artist. Where you could have put that on Hard Promises, probably, because I'm sure the way because if you go back and listen to the way they used to play it live because they played this live in 1980. Before it was, and so when you listen to that, it's like, yeah, it's more of a rock and roll song. There's no horns in there, and it's got this extra verse, and so it could fit. But then what I love is the fact that it's there, and at some point, someone says, we should look into, we should redo Trailer. That was a good song. We should have put that on something. Should have been on Southern Accents. Let's do that one and just give it breathe some new life into it, and that's just super cool.
Yeah. So let me ask. So we have 3 covers that were recorded at the time that didn't make the album, and they would have made more sense if this had been a double album and you're trying to fill 18 tracks or something.
Yeah.
The Image of Me was on the playback box set, Conway Twitty cover, Big Boss Man, Jimmy Reed cover, Cracking Up, Nick Lowe cover. And the Nick Lowe one is a little, I went back to listen to the original and I was like, this is an odd choice for a concept, Englishman covering this Englishman for a concept album about the South. So I didn't include any of those, which I can get into the actual track listing. So why don't you, if you would, give me your producer for a day track list for this album? What would you do?
Okay, so it's tight. So I've taken a path that fans probably are not going to love, and I'm probably going to get some comments on this, but start with Rebels, but I'm going to go the alternate version. And one of the main reasons is, again, I think that it loses a little bit of impact just because it's with those horns up so much. There's not as much space in it as there possibly could be. And I love the fact that they took out those drum hits in the intro over the top of Mike's guitar playing, because I think that then when they do come in and the drums come in, it's got more impact. So that's why I kind of went with the alternate version. Straight into Trailer. Again, that's a good segue. Straight into Dogs on the Run, and then finish side one with Southern accents. So I'm doing a Paulsen here. I'm starting out. I'm loading up the front end with all the big guns because I think the sequence of those really, really flows. Then side 2, start with Spike, into the Apartment song, Walking from the Fire, and then finish with the alternate version with the extra verse of the Best of Everything. And if I could throw one caveat into, I'd say I'd just get rid of that lead horn line that I talked about. I think that would then be, for the concept, for that Southern accents concept, I think those songs really flow and everything fits to my ear.
I have listened to this actually. You previewed this for me, and I do think as a straight concept album about the South, this does work. The flow works very well. I think you did a good job in terms of fast, slow, loud, softer, quieter, and then closing with Best of Everything is excellent. This is a good one. If I had decided to remove Don't Come Around Here No More, this would be something that I would have done. So do you want me to run through mine?
Well, I just have to throw in a quick caveat though, just before people do lose their minds. I love Don't Come Around Here No More. I gave it a 10. I think it's a phenomenal song. It's one of those standouts in his catalog, but it doesn't fit the concept. So I was trying to just get back to the concept of Southern accents. What I would do is probably, I think I told you this, is I'd release Don't Come Around Here No More as a single and maybe make it better, Forget About Me on the B-side. And It Ain't Nothing to Me, if that turned up later on playback or American Treasure, I'd be fine with that. And same with Mary's New Car. I'll give chapter and verse on why I don't like that song. So I think, again, just bringing it back to the concept, those 8 songs, when I listened to it, I was like, yeah, this works for me. And it's short. It's quite punchy. It's only 20 minutes just less than 20 minutes per side. So, yeah.
I think it works. And I do wonder how much the fact that, Tom knew that he probably had a hit with Don't Come Around Here No More prompted him to put it on the album, because he wasn't one to leave any big hits off. Like the Beatles would release, had like a policy or something that they would release singles and not have them on the, wouldn't release them again on the album until later, I think later on.
Ticket to Ride, Paperback Rider, Hey Jude, all those were singles only, right? So
the past Masters discs, I think, had just a boatload of just amazing classics that were never on an album.
Yeah.
But that wasn't something that Tom did. So I like what you're doing, and maybe you could have convinced him to release as a single. It still would have been a major hit for him. So here's how I justified including it. Okay, so I also prefer I just think the alternate version of Rebels is superior in many ways. So than the album version. So I'm starting there, and then I'm pulling what I call another Paulsen, which is where I'm going to bring back a couple of tracks from their last sessions. So Jimmy Iovine said that Keeping Me Alive was too country for the last album, and Long After Dark. So why not, since we're reviving Best of Everything, why not revive Keeping Me Alive? It works really well after Rebels. Fits really well sonically, I believe, and it does have it doesn't really talk about the South, but it does have obviously a Southern feel to it with the way it's written in the music. So Southern accents at 3. And then I'm bringing back another track from Long After Dark. It's only a couple of years ago, so why not keep a little soul? Now this one, if you listen to it, you can kind of hear, he's talking, the main character is talking to his girlfriend or girl that he likes, and is trying to, it sounds to me like he's trying to get her to leave and leave the town, leave the area, leave whatever. So maybe that little bit of that wanderlust starting here on side A with Keep a Little Soul. It does have a great piano and roots rock feel to it to me. And then closing out side A, Best of Everything alternate version. Fantastic way, I think, to close side A. And then opening up the side B, the Apartment song with Stevie Nicks. Great to hear her along with him opening the second side. Walking from a Fire, which we didn't really get into a whole lot, but if we're briefly talking about that, definitely has some Southern storytelling in it, talking about his little brother being arrested by the cops for dealing drugs. He's talking about how his mom loved Chuck Berry, I think, last verse, if I'm remembering correctly. Some very vivid pictures there from Walking on the Fire. Then I would go into the trailer, the demo version. I've had to make a couple playlists so I could listen to this in my car. So I use the Mudcrutch version in my car because I don't have the playback available there, but I do have it on my desktop. So trailer, third track, side B, then Spike, which to me is kind of a take it or leave it track in here. But the fact that you like it so much, and it does fit with these concept album idea at 9, and then Dogs on the Run at 10. And to me, Dogs on the Run is sort of the signifier that this is Tom and his group of his pack leaving Florida to go to California. And who do you meet in California? You meet weird people like Dave Stewart, who take you down the rabbit hole. And so to close the album at 11, Don't Come Around Here No More kind of sums up the entire thing. His whole youth, the South, Rebels, Southern accents, etc. trailer, and then getting into California there, because he obviously loved the state of California. And it is weird. It is a weird state. You have to have that sort of adventurous spirit to come out here. And he did. He came out here and he met Dave Stewart. And Dave Stewart, took him down the rabbit hole.
I love it. I love the justification, and it does. Like I said, you sent the playlist to me too, and I was listening. I was like, yeah, this does definitely flow. And I do like absolutely. And I think, like you said, because I think when you end side 1 with the Best of Everything and you end side 2 with Don't Come Around Here No More, those are very, very good bookends, because it would be difficult to shoehorn in Don't Come Around Here and No More anywhere else. You can't really put it in between, right? I mean, of course they done on the album, but it doesn't work anywhere else. And I know that, again, Michael Washburn said it sort of does fit with that Southern theme of get off my lawn. It's got that kind of ornery sort of Southern brusqueness to it almost. So I'm totally fine with that. That's great. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think the tempo change at the end too, just the way that
Yeah.
that closes the album, it's a monster. And he could still release it as a single, obviously, and make a lot of money. This album, I think, like, you know, I've sent you my Wildflowers too, which I love.
Yeah.
This
Me
is
too.
probably my second favorite alternate track list that I've
Cool.
made. I really like listening to this. And yeah, you did ask, oh, well, you used Keeping Me Alive and Keep a Little Soul on the Long After Dark alternate. I think I would probably jettison that idea, because thinking about it, it was like these songs fit really well with what Tom was heading towards and ended up trying to do with Southern accents, but really wasn't able to do it because he brought Jimmy Iovine back in and Dave Stewart's there, and it's just, as we mentioned, a hodgepodge. But if he had really gone hardcore and really tried to do this, I think these two tracks might have really fit. Now I wonder, were these even considered? Like, these were not used on Long After Dark. They're two really good songs. He did like them later enough to put them on his American Treasure compilation, but were they even considered? Did he think about it? Was it, you know, too much to go back to 82, 81 when these were written and perhaps include them on on Southern accents? I really wonder if this was even something that, you know, crossed his mind.
Well, it clearly wasn't too early to go back, right? Because the Best of Everything is from 1980.
Right.
It was written. It was played in 1980 live, so it was written at least in 1980. So, yeah, I don't think there wouldn't have been any reticence about that. And I think that, you know, I think Best of Everything gets on there because, you know, if Robbie Robertson produces your record, that's kind of a big deal at that stage in your career. You know,
Yeah,
so I
probably,
think that was always sitting there waiting. Well, I want to do something with it eventually, and this is where it sort of just dropped. Right? Well, we've got to use it now, or it's never going to get onto an album, maybe.
Yeah, I think he wasn't planning to use it until Robbie Robertson changed it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, like fixed it or whatever. He thought that Robbie did such a great job with it that he decided to include it on the album. But I think I think it fits with everything else that's here.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. Absolutely. Well, it's the nice thing though too, right? You can have, when you take these different approaches, and that's what I love about your playlists. It makes you think about, you know, the songs, it's the context that the songs were written in, all those things. It just tweaks that and makes you think about it a little bit more deeply, right?
Well, this is a situation where I just wanted to include "Don't Come Around Here No More" because it's a fantastic song, and I have to back into my reasoning as to why to include it. But I do kind of think, you know, his whole deal, Tom's, was that the whole story is that they grew up in Florida, left Florida, went to California, things got weird. And I think that this is a summation of that whole story to that point, you know, 1984, 1985.
So I guess one last question then. How often do you actually, I mean, you've been listening to it a lot lately, but Southern Accents, you said, probably isn't an album that you throw on very often, and it's not one that I do either, because it is so jarring. But the weird thing is, and I definitely do it with the vinyl. I don't know if I would do it with my phone, but I don't skip over Mary's New Car. I don't skip over It Ain't Nothing to Me. I don't start side 2 on track 2. So if you're going to listen to this album, can you still appreciate the album as an album and as this snapshot of this crazy, frenetic sort of creative period that was going on in Tom's life? Or is it just too messy that you don't really listen to it as an album, or you don't think you will again?
I probably won't for a while. If I do listen to this album, I'll be listening to my version of it because I love it. And I have decided that I'm better at this than some people that were producing albums in the day, at least to what I like to listen to. So I can get the highlights of it. I can bring up all these B-sides that were amazing that don't see the light of day. Those are the ones I want to hear over and over again. I don't need to hear Mary's New Car.
Yeah.
You know, or It Ain't Nothing to Me. Like, I don't need that in my life at this point. So I probably am done for a while with the original version of this album. Well, let's continue to listen to my version of it. And, you know, when you're in the mood to listen to Tom, I don't always throw on an album unless I want us to hear a specific album. And I don't think that this is going to trump maybe like my Dogs with Wings playlist that has a bunch of live, you know, B-side type versions of songs that I'd like to hear more often. So, you know, in the pantheon of Tom Petty, it's a solid album. Obviously has a huge hit on it, some other great tracks, but as we mentioned, the lows are, I would say, a little lower than a typical Heartbreakers album. And
that was I came out of this, so I've got 3 10s on there, and I've got 2 5s and a 4. So it's the biggest discrepancy between songs that I've come across so far, because it is, you know, like I said, the highs are so high.
You should have 4 4 10s if you graded Best of Everything properly.
I'm gonna go back and redo it. I know that's gonna be. I've got to go back and redo this, and maybe I'll get you on. Maybe I'll get you on when I review that episode. Then I'll make you sit and listen to bass lines and cowbells and.
So good, so good.
Okay, well, where can people find you, John? Where can they find you if they're looking for you online to come and talk to you about your playlist?
At 444_John, the number 4 FOR, the number 4_John. That's my main fantasy football handle. And if you want to tell me how great my Southern accents alternate track list is, then be, for sure, hit me up there. If you don't like it, then just go scream into the void, because that's where your criticism belongs.
That's about as much as you listen to it.
I'm actually interested to hear what people think, and I will send you a link to the playlist that actually has the Mudcrutch version of Trailer. So if people out there want to listen to the album front to back in my way, then do that. And I think you should also offer a link to your YouTube playlist so that people can hear it that way as well.